While watching a playthrough of the amazing Banshee fan game, a comment underneath the video birthed a cool idea in my head about how Michael could have encountered or salvaged the last possessed animatronics in old locations from throughout the series. With Squattrap himself, I believe that the mastermind behind the missing children incident would be found inside the burnt out and charred remains of Fazbear's Fright, where after remaining there and fixing himself until Michael would eventually find him and take him to Henry's Pizzeria.
The ruins of Fazbear's Fright were silent, the scent of ash and decay heavy in the night air. Michael Afton stood at the splintered remains of the main entrance, his flashlight beam slicing through the suffocating darkness. The horror attraction was gone, a memory now, a monument to a night that had nearly killed him. He wasn't here to reminisce on his own trauma, though. He was here to find something else, to find the last physical piece of the man who had created it all. He found it in the back corner of what was once the main hall. It was a twisted, pathetic form, half buried under scorched ceiling tiles and bits of melted plastic. The animatronic suit was a burnt mockery of a rabbit, its single glowing eye now nothing more than a lifeless, cracked lens. He saw the bones fused with the metal endoskeleton, the terrifying and unmistakable remains of his father, William Afton. The beast was inactive, dormant, and still somehow radiating a cold, malevolent energy that made the hairs on Michael's arms stand up. Michael knelt, the crunch of charred rubble under his boots echoing in the stillness. A familiar, suffocating weight settled on his shoulders. The face of his father, not as a monster, but as a man, flashed in his mind. He remembered the deceptive smile, the quiet cruelty, the way William had used them all as tools in his gruesome games. He remembered the fear that had always simmered beneath the surface of their family, a fear that had led to the death of his own brother and the disappearance of his sister. This inert machine wasn't just a burnt animatronic, it was the physical embodiment of a family's twisted, murderous legacy. A lesser man would have fled, left corpse and its sins to rot, but Michael had a purpose, a final, terrible act of atonement. Henry's words echoed in his mind, the promise of a safe place, a trap set to catch the last of the children's spirits, and more importantly, the man who had put them there. Michael had a part to play, and it was to bring this monster to its final resting place. With a deep breath, he began his work. He struggled to lift the heavy, tangled mass of metal and bone. He had salvaged the other animatronics, but this one was different. It was his father. He carefully loaded it into a heavy-duty bag he'd brought with him. The fragments of plastic and the presence of saving was likely to be burned. The weight of it was immense, a crushing reminder of the burden he was carrying, not just for himself, but for every child lost to his father's madness. Michael drove through the dark city streets, the bag of broken parts in the back of his truck. He wasn't taking it to the dump, he was taking it home. He pulled up to a small, nondescript building that looked like a newly opened pizzeria. The smell of fresh paint and new pizza ovens was a strange comfort after the stench of ash. He unloaded the bag, hauling it inside to a dark room where Henry waited. Michael didn't say anything, didn't need to. He simply dropped the heavy bag on the floor, the metallic thud, a final punctuation mark. The journey was over, the trap was set. Now all they could do was wait.
Switching over to Lefty, I believe that the bear will be already in the fake pizzeria, with Henry capturing and bringing the marionette to the pizzeria before Michael would even arrive. Given that we see the puppet within the FNAF 1 restaurant during the FNAF 2 minigames, I believe that this is where it will be found, staying there after the events of the following minigames.
The locator device in Henry's hand was a simple thing, a relic from his past life as an inventor, but its purpose was grim. It pulsed with a steady red light, guiding him through the dark streets to a place he had hoped he would never see again, the abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The building was a hollowed-out carcass, a tombstone for forgotten childhoods. The familiar smell of stale pizza and disinfectant had been replaced by a stench of mold and rust. He pushed open the heavy front doors, the hinges groaning in protest, and stepped into the past. The main dining hall was a desolate sight. Tables lay on their sides, chairs were scattered, and the stage was a platform for rot and decay. This was where it had all begun. He remembered this place in its prime, the laughter of children, the bright lights, the cheerful, if slightly unsettling music. He remembered his daughter, Charlotte, playing with her friends right outside, her kind nature a beacon of light in a world that would soon grow dark. She had always been so gentle, so empathetic, especially toward lonely souls. It was her legacy that he was now trying to honor, her spirit he was trying to save from the fate William Afton had cursed her with. His gaze fell on a tall, dark figure in the center of the room. It was Lefty, his final, masterful creation. The animatronic was not violent, it was methodical. Its single red eye glowed dimly as it worked, its movements careful and deliberate. Its mission was simple and singular: contain the puppet. The marionette's black and white form thrashed within Lefty's mechanical grip, its mask-like face contorted in a silent scream. Henry could hear the grinding of metal as Lefty's containment protocols activated, the soft snap of spring locks echoing in the dead silence. It was a brutal act, but a necessary one. A child's soul, trapped in a puppet for so long, could finally be at rest. As he watched Lefty succeed, Henry's thoughts drifted back to his old friend, William. They had once been so close, two partners in crime, though their crimes were of a different sort back then, building a business empire out of springs and gears and felt. He remembered their late-night talks, their shared passion for robotics, their competing yet collaborative genius. But then, the darkness began to show. The missing children, the whispers, the lies. Henry had ignored the signs for too long, blinded by friendship and his own obsessive work. His failure to confront William had cost his daughter her life and had trapped her soul in that puppet. Now, years later, he was the one who had to put her to rest. With a final, decisive click, the puppet was completely contained within Lefty's internal body cavity. The struggle ceased. The room fell silent. Henry walked forward, his footsteps heavy and final, and placed a hand on Lefty's cool, metallic arm. "Good work, my friend," he whispered, a tired smile on his face. This was not a goodbye, but a promise. With a great effort, he began the process of transporting Lefty, the last piece of his terrible plan. The trap was almost complete. All that was left now was the fire.
With Scrap Baby, judging by the spotlights in her chest, I believe that Michael will find Baby within the dilapidated remains of Circus Baby's entertainment or rental, with this encounter being long after the event's sister location and Didophobia as a whole.
The entrance to Circus Baby's entertainment and rental was just as Michael remembered it, a dark, gaping maw in the earth, smelling of damp concrete and the faint, unsettling sweetness of decay. He hadn't been here in years, not since he had been a walking corpse, hollowed out and possessed. He knew the paths through the cold mechanical labyrinth better than anyone. His flashlight cut through the oppressive darkness as he descended, the beam dancing over rusted metal and abandoned control panels. He wasn't here to hide, he was here to find her. He found her in the main control room, her form a ghastly fusion of jagged metal and discarded parts. She was hunched over a console, a tangled mess of wires and rusted bolts. Her face was cracked open, revealing a grotesque metal skeleton beneath, and her once bright green eyes now glowed with a malevolent, corrupted light. This wasn't Elizabeth. This was Scrap Baby, a monster built on the bones of his sister's innocence and his father's evil. A wave of memories washed over Michael. He remembered the day his father, William, built Circus Baby's Pizza World, his sinister creation that lured children to their deaths. He remembered Elizabeth, so excited to see the animatronic, ignoring her father's warnings to stay away. He remembered the moment he saw the twisted fate of his sister, her spirit trapped inside the machine. His father had orchestrated all of it, and Michael had been a bystander, a useless older brother who couldn't save his sister from their father's cruelty. A sharp clatter broke him from his thoughts. She had heard him. She lurched to life, her metallic limbs unfolding and stretching into a terrifying, towering form. "Daddy, is that you?" Her voice was a chilling, childlike static, but her actions were pure rage. She lunged, her sharp claw hand aimed at his chest. Michael sidestepped, the claw tearing a deep scar into the wall behind him. He wasn't here to fight. He was here to fulfill a promise. He reached into his bag and pulled out a heavy-duty stun gun he had acquired. As Baby lunged again, he aimed and fired. The stun gun emitted a loud electric crack, and the prongs lodged themselves deep into her exposed wiring. A brilliant flash of blue light illuminated the room, and Baby shrieked, a sound more machine than human. She spasmed violently for a moment, her limbs locking in place, before her glowing eyes flickered and died. She slumped to the floor, silent and still. He had to work quickly before she rebooted. He carefully secured her with thick straps, ensuring her menacing limbs and claws couldn't move. He wasn't tearing her apart, he was simply containing her. He had a job to do. With a deep, weary sigh, he began to drag her heavy, inert body out of the facility, a son carrying the terrible remains of his family's legacy. He loaded her into his truck, the weight of her presence a constant, heavy reminder of the past. He was going to Henry's. It was the only way to end it. The drive was silent and somber. As Michael pulled up to the location Henry had given him, a newly built pizzeria, he felt a sense of finality. He had brought them all here, now, his father, his sister, and the other lost souls. He wasn't a hero, just the reluctant courier of his family's destruction. The final piece was in place. Now, all that was left was the fire.
Jumping over to Molten Freddy, based on what we see during the ending moments of Sister Location, I see Michael encountering the amalgamation in the sewers, possibly around Henry's fake pizzeria, with the boy having to lure it into the confines of the labyrinth.
The sewers were a suffocating maze of damp concrete and rust. The air, thick with the smell of mold and stagnant water, felt heavy in Michael's lungs. His flashlight beam cut through the absolute darkness, dancing over moss-slicked walls and pools of murky liquid. This place was a perfect reflection of his life, dark, decaying, and filled with the ghosts of his past. He had come down here to find one of them. He had come from Molten Freddy. He heard it before he saw it, a low, mechanical chittering that echoed from the tunnels ahead. A sound that was a twisted parody of laughter, a chilling reminder of his time in Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. He rounded a corner and shone his light on the source of the sound. There it was, a horrifying mass of tangled wires, broken plastic masks, and glowing red eyes. The broken shell of Funtime Freddy's mask sat atop the jumbled wires, but below it, pieces of Ballora and Funtime Foxy were visible, a Frankenstein's monster of animatronic parts. "You've come to see me," a voice hissed, a mangled chorus of whispers and static. Michael froze. The voice was familiar, a fragmented memory of the amalgamation that had once used his body as a puppet, Ennard. But this was something worse, something broken and driven by pure, unadulterated rage. This was Molten Freddy. He didn't have time to reminisce. The animatronic surged forward, its massive wires slithering across the wet floor with unnerving speed. Michael dodged a rusty clawed arm that was once Funtime Freddy's, the metal scraping his shoulder as it passed. This thing was a living nightmare, a physical manifestation of his father's cruelty. The souls of William's child victims were trapped within this horrifying mass, their anguish and fury feeling its every violent movement. Michael saw the reflection of his own guilt in its red eyes, a guilt he had been carrying for years. He knew he couldn't fight it. He had to trap it. He ducked into a side tunnel, the chittering behind him growing louder and more frantic. He ran toward a large rusted grate that covered a pipe access shaft. He had a plan, a risky, desperate one. As Molten Freddy's tangled massive wires lunged for him, Michael jammed his crowbar into the wall next to the grate. He wedged it in with a grunt, the metal groaning as he pried the grate open. Molten Freddy, driven by its predatory instincts, followed him in a mad rush. Just as its head reached the opening, Michael slammed the crowbar against the grate, causing it to fall and trap the animatronic. The sound of Molten Freddy's thrashing was deafening, a cacophony of scraping metal and frustrated screeches. It was contained, but only just. He wrapped thick chains around the grate, securing it in place. The weight of the animatronic was immense, a heavy, suffocating mass that reminded Michael of the burden of his family's legacy. He had to deliver it to Henry. This was the only way to end it all. With a final weary sigh, Michael began the slow, grim process of hauling the bundle of wires toward the surface, leaving the cold, damp sewers behind for good.
If the logbook animatronics actually appeared during the events of Pizzeria Simulator, I believe that he would be found in the abandoned Freddy's just like the marionette, with Michael possibly using his remnant connection to them in order to lure them to the pizzeria.
The stench of decay was the first thing that hit Michael. A thick, cloying miasma of stale pizza mold and something else. Something metallic and deeply sad. The door of the abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza groaned open, revealing the skeletal remains of what was once a child's paradise. Dust motes danced in the slivers of moonlight slicing through the boarded-up windows, illuminating the forgotten relics of a dark past. He moved through the main dining hall, his boots crunching on discarded party favors and dried pizza crusts. The stage loomed ahead, a monument to a terrible tragedy. Upon it stood the four animatronics, their forms hunched and broken. Freddy's plastic eyes were milky white, a stark contrast to the tarnished brown of his body. Body was missing his faceplate, revealing a nest of frayed wires and a silent scream. Chica's jaw was unhinged, and Foxy's tattered pirate cove was a testament to his unending torment. Michael could feel them before they moved. A chilling cold seeped into his bones, a familiar ache of grief and confusion. It was the remnant, the ghostly essence that connected him to them. He felt it in his own being, the same substance that had resurrected him, and he could feel it swirling around him now, thick with decades of unexpressed pain. He felt Gabriel's bewildered anger inside Freddy, the quiet terror that had twisted into a monstrous rage. He felt Susie's sorrow in Chica, an unending lament for her lost toy and her stolen life. The jittery, frantic anxiety of Jeremy pulsed from Bonnie, and the desperate, heartbreaking loneliness of Fritz radiated from Foxy. They were no longer just children. They were furious, glitching echoes. A low hum filled the room, the sound of ancient servos groaning to life. The animatronic's eyes, once dead and dull, flickered with a hateful, incandescent white. They saw him, but they didn't see Michael. They saw a figure that triggered a deep, primal rage. The animatronics lunged forward, their movements erratic and violent. It was a confused and unthinking fury, a lashing out at the phantom of their killer that their fractured minds had conjured in his image. Freddy's jaw snapped, a broken, garbled hiss escaping his speaker. Bonnie's head twitched side to side, a silent, spastic tremor. Michael stood his ground, a hand outstretched. He had to make them understand. "I know what you see," he said, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the mechanical din. "You see him, Afton, the one who trapped you inside these things." The name hung in the air, a word loaded with poison and pain. The animatronics froze mid-lunge, their white eyes flickered, the rage momentarily subsiding, replaced by a flicker of confusion. "But I'm not him. You know I'm not," Michael continued, his voice softer now. "I know your pain. I feel it. We're connected, aren't we?" He held up his hand, letting them feel the cold, electric energy of the remnant that flowed between them. "He stole your lives, and he's still out there, and he's still hurting people." He paused, letting his words sink in. He knew the only thing that could supersede their rage and suffering was a shared purpose. "I have a way out, a new place, a new beginning," he said, gesturing back toward the door. "It's where we can finally find him, where we can end his cycle of torment once and for all. This isn't your prison anymore. It's just a broken husk." A deep, shuddering hum rippled through the room. Freddy lowered his head, his hands clenching and unclenching. Bonnie's wires went still. Chica's shaking stopped. One by one, their glowing eyes dimmed, the white light softening into a weary orange. The confused rage was gone, replaced by a desperate, silent understanding. They were listening now, no longer as tormented spirits, but as children finally given a chance to fight back. Michael turned, and the creaks and groans of the animatronics followed him out of the darkness and into the night, united by the single, powerful promise of vengeance.
Given what we see in both UCN and the Fazbear's Frights books, it's likely that Golden Freddy wasn't around during the events of Pizzeria Simulator, either latched on and keeping Afton alive, or tracking the killer all the way to Henry's Pizzeria, hell-bent on getting her sweet revenge.
The air in Henry's fake pizzeria was heavy with a false sense of peace. Michael had done it. He had brought them all to this place, his father, his sister, the tangled mess of Molten Freddy, and the angry, confused spirits of the original animatronics. The trap was set. Now, all he had to do was wait for Henry to ignite the final fire and end it all. He leaned against a wall, the silence, a stark contrast to the chaos he had just endured in the old pizzerias and the damp sewers. A cold shiver ran down his spine. The air had dropped a few degrees. He looked up, his flashlight beam sweeping across the room. There was a faint sound, like static on an old radio, and then it appeared, materializing out of thin air. It was a golden version of Freddy Fazbear, its eyes and teeth black voids in the dim light. It sat slumped on the floor, its head twitching with a ghastly, unnatural motion. Michael's blood ran cold. He hadn't brought this one. He hadn't even known it was still here, still active. His mind raced, trying to understand how this phantom, this ghost of a nightmare, had followed them. He didn't get a chance to think. The moment his gaze met the empty black sockets of the golden bear, the world around him dissolved. He was no longer in the pizzeria. He was back in that moment, at the bite. He saw his younger self, a foolish, cruel teenager, laughing as he stuffed his brother into the mouth of the animatronic. He heard his brother's terrified screams, the sickening crunch of metal, the final, horrifying silence. A different memory followed, a blurry flash of a little girl with a red balloon, then the image of his sister Elizabeth running toward the animatronic his father had warned her about. He saw the doors slam shut, the final, chilling sight of his sister's trusting smile before she was gone forever. The visions were relentless, each one a fresh wave of agony. The specter wasn't just showing him these things, it was forcing him to relive them, to feel the crushing weight of his guilt and failure. He had faced the anger of the other animatronics, the rage of the puppet, the frustration of Molten Freddy, but this was different. This was pure malice. He knew this soul was unique. It was the spirit of one of William's very first victims, a child whose suffering had fueled a terrible, vengeful power. He understood now that this spirit's hatred wasn't just for his father, it was also for him. Golden Freddy saw him, not as a son atoning for his sins, but as an Afton, a direct link to the man who had cursed them all. The torment was not a misplaced rage, but a precise, calculated punishment for the son who had failed to stop his father, and had even, in his own terrible way, contributed to the chaos. Just as quickly as it had begun, the torment stopped, the golden bear vanished, and Michael found himself back in the quiet pizzeria, gasping for air, sweat beading on his forehead. The other animatronics were still there, dormant and silent. He looked from one to the next. Scrap Rap, Scrap Baby, Molten Freddy, Lefty, the original four, and then back to the empty spot where Golden Freddy had been. He now understood the full extent of the evil they were about to face. This wasn't just a simple fire. This was a reckoning, and he had a feeling that the ghost of the Golden Bear would be the last one standing, waiting for them all.